Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello everybody and welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast. This week I'm going to talk about idioms and whether it's good to learn English idioms. And I've also written an article about this, so if you want to read the article you can go to the show notes page, which this week is www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 38. And this article is a guest article for Christina's blog, so Christina wrote the article about why it's good to have language teaching. So then I wrote a guest article for Christina, and this is my guest article. So it's on Christina's blog, and she also wrote a German translation of my article. So if you speak German, you can read the German version as well. So the topic for today, is it good to learn English idioms? Well, I think it is, because that's why I've got on my Facebook page, we have weeks looking at different types of idioms, so I tend to put them together in groups. We had wolf idioms and horse idioms and idioms about parts of the body. And it's good to learn them because they aren't just words that have their individual meanings. An idiom is a group of words which together has a different meaning. So it's good to learn them because you may come across them, you may hear them or see them in texts, and it may not be clear straight away what's meant by these words put together. So it's good to learn what these phrases mean as a set phrase rather than just the individual words. It's good to put them all together and learn what this set phrase means. And some of them will be obvious to you because, for example, if you're a German speaker, then the early bird catches the worm. That means the same in German as it does in English. So it's not just about birds and their food. It's about how it's good to be early, to get up early, or it's good to be not to hang around and wait because it's good to be first. Like an early adopter of a product or something like that. But it can also mean, get up and start your day early. But the point is that it can be applied to people and not just birds and worms. So if there is an idiom in your language that means the same thing, then the meaning in English will be clear to you. But there are some where it's just specific to English, and then you need to learn what it means. So the question is it good to learn idioms? Yes, I think it is. But there are a few things that you need to think about when you're trying to decide which ones you want to learn first and whether to use them in your everyday speech and writing. And one of the first things you need to think about is the idiom that I'm learning something that people actually use? Because there are really long lists. You can get books, you can find them online, and I've noticed that some of them have huge lists, which is great for looking something up. If you've heard it and you don't understand it, it's a great resource for finding out what something means. But in terms of learning them, some of them are not particularly useful because they're not things that people say anymore. And if you said them, people may just look at you like, what are you saying? Because that idiom isn't in use anymore. So it's good to listen to people around you and to read current texts and information and find out what people are actually saying rather than just learning a list of idioms because they're in your book or something like that. I try to only post ones that are used. So if you look at my Facebook page, I try to use modern ones that are still in use, but I have seen Facebook pages sharing information about things that people just don't say anymore, and that's a bit unfortunate, I think, because it's good to have the knowledge, but if you start saying things and people don't know what you're talking about, that's not so good. So make sure that people are still using the idiom that you're learning is always a good thing. And for example, sometimes idioms go out of date because, for example, change the record. That means stop talking about the same thing. You're getting on my nerves talking about the same thing again and again. But we don't use records anymore. We have CDs and we stream music, we download music, but we don't have the old-fashioned records and record players. So change the record. Nobody really says that because it's out of date and technology's moved on. So just be aware of whether people are actually using the idiom. And the second thing is regional differences. So it's good when you're learning English to decide what kind of English you want to learn. So I teach British English, and there's American English and plenty of other types of English, and some of the idioms are specific to the country or even the region. So, for example, there's an old idiom that says, what is it? Look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. So it means if you are good at looking after small amounts of money, you will then, when you earn more, you'll be able to look after and to save and to manage larger amounts well, because you started off well with small amounts. But that's making a direct reference to pounds and pennies, which we use in the UK. In America, for example, that probably wouldn't be said, because pennies and pounds are not the currency that's used there. And for example, if there's a different word, people talk about skeletons in your cupboard, so something that you don't want people to find out about that would put you in a bad light, potentially. We say that the skeletons are in the cupboard, whereas in American English, I've seen it that the skeletons are in the closet. And we don't use the word closet in English, British English, so you can see there that there's a regional difference just with this word. And in that way, you can see whether it's British or American English, and depending on which type of English you want to learn, then you probably want to learn the one that's used in the specific type of English that you want to learn. And the third and final thing is it appropriate for you and for the situation? So once you've learned an idiom, is it something that you would be happy saying? Because it's okay learning the meaning, but for example, the things that young people, maybe teenagers, would say will be different from what I would say as someone in their early 30s. And something that I would say to my friends, I probably wouldn't say to my boss if I had one, which I don't. But when I used to have a boss, you have to think about the situation. Is it appropriate to use this idiom? Because you may know what it means and you may have the context right, but you also have to think about A, is this something that I would say, would feel happy saying, and B, is this appropriate for the situation that I'm in? Is it something that my friend may laugh about, a colleague may find offensive? So just take note when you see idioms being used of where they're being used and by whom and what kind of situation it is. So just think about whether it's something that's right for the situation or whether you may end up offending someone. And finally, don't forget that I often post about idioms on my Facebook page, so if you want to head over to the page, I post during the week a couple of times a day usually with some information or a question or a tip or an idiom. Then you can head over to www.facebook.com/EnglishWithKirsty, and then you'll see regular content from me there. So I hope you found this useful, and I hope you have a good week, and I'll be back again next week. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.